It is a wintry mess outside of my house. I am so ready for spring. Let's do some spring DIYs and thrift flips together. And today we're focusing on all things green. For our first project, I have this beautiful little, I don't even know what, container of some kind. Comment below if you know what this was used for. I got it at the thrift store. I believe it was a couple dollars, and it was a day that I got everything 50% off. I am starting by painting it with one of the cottage colors by Jamie Ray Vintage. This is a DIY color that is an all-in-one. I painted it in the white color, I think it's called cottage linen. And I will say that after painting 3 coats of this paint on these pieces, I really still didn't get complete coverage. So I'm still very new to using this type of paint. It is a very durable paint when it finishes, but I do struggle with getting the lighter colors from this line to actually obtain full coverage. So I'm actually going to switch gears and I'm going to come in with a green. I'm mixing together Conservatory with some white paint to lighten it up a bit, and I'm going to be painting my piece in 1 to 1.5 coats of this paint. A few weeks ago, I shared with you some of the different paints that I have tried. I will say when I'm mixing paints like this, what I've started doing is using some of my white paints that I have from the less expensive lines like Apple Barrel paint or Folk Art and mixing them with my more expensive paints like the Fusion that I am using today. So this is Fusion mixed with a white by Apple Barrel paint to create this color, and it provides some really great coverage as well as a beautiful color. So it's something that you can absolutely do. Do not feel, nervous to mix paints from different lines and worry that there's going to be something that happens to your paint. I have not had any issues, and I have mixed a variety of different paints from a variety of different brands. Since I had a little extra paint, I grabbed a couple other things that I had in my stash that had not sold on my website and I knew I wanted to remake. So these are 2 candle holders that I created last year when I was doing a more primitive video, and this was right around the 4th of July. So you'll see the red, white, and blue style. I'm gonna switch it up and make it something a little bit more neutral and probably a little bit more accessible to a wider audience on my website. Now that our little dish and pot, our container, are dry, I am going to take some of the scrap transfers that I have in my stash. I believe this is from the Seeds catalog or Ephemeral Melange transfer set. Both of them are from IOD, and I am just going to position the transfers on the front of the little container and then on the dish at the bottom. I was actually pretty impressed that I was able to get around this rounded surface, and you'll see I end up using that red text that you see to the right over top of what I'm transferring now. But before I did that, I actually cut the rest of the text that was on that strip of the transfer off, and I am positioning it on the dish and trying to come up with the best positioning to kind of bring the rest of this text together. Here is the last little bit of the transfers that I had left from whatever set this came from. And I'm going to finish up by rounding it over the other text that was on the little pot. And it actually creates a perfect arch right around that base. I seal everything with a polyacrylic sealer. I'm using Big Top by DIY for this project. And once I have both pieces sealed, I start to think about what I can use to display this little set. So I decided to go into my stash and grab some foam clay. So this is an air dry clay, but it's a foam base. You can see it's very, very light. And I created 3 little eggs with it. And now I am painting them with oatmeal, which is a folk art paint. I basically just shook up that paint bottle, and when I opened it, I used the cap of the folk art and added some water to kind of wash it down or wet it down a little bit. Now I'm using a toothbrush that I found when I was cleaning out my bathroom closet last week, and it has been thrown into my stash to use for a project, and here's how we can use it. I'm getting some Prairie Gray, which is a DIY paint that I got out of one of Sonnet's Maker's box. And I am going to kind of rub some of that paint onto the toothbrush, and then I'm running my thumb along the toothbrush bristles to spritz on the little bits of paint kind of in speckles. For my next set of projects, I'll be using the color Farm Fresh. Now, I know that many people call this like a blue. To me, it's more of a blue-green. We're going to go with it for this video and just call it a green. I am going to be using it on 3 different containers. I have this one that I had already DIY'd, I guess about a year ago, and I'm going to be painting over it. It was base painted in a cream and then a taupe color. So I'm going to be using the Farm Fresh on this color, a black, and then a white. And we're going to wet distress all 3 of those just to kind of see what it looks like in each of the different scenarios. So here is the taupe. Here is our second container, and this one has been sprayed with a black gloss spray paint. And I'm going to be covering it with that same Farm Fresh. And then I have this sifter that I got from Susie at Susie on the Farm at one of her Whatnot sales. I'm almost positive that's where this came from. And I will be covering it with the same Farm Fresh color. It is not, it was a glossy, like very slick finish on the actual container, but I did not spray seal it or anything. I wanted to show you what the clay-based paint really can do when it comes to various surfaces. I'm going to give all 3 pieces 2 coats of this Farm Fresh color. Those 3 containers dry overnight, and the next day I came back and I am wet distressing all 3 of them. I did start with a little baby wipe and then realized that it would be much easier to do with a microfiber cloth, so I switched to that for the rest of the project. I'm going to seal all 3 of those containers with Big Top by DIY, which is my polyacrylic sealer. And now it's time to embellish our containers. I'm taking a variety of scraps of decoupage paper that I've had, and I am going to take a little artist brush and a little bit of water and very gently run that line around each of the little drawings that I'd like to use on one of my containers. Once I have each of my little drawings picked out, I am going to paint the backs of them with some white paint. I will let that dry and then we'll come back and decoupage them onto one of the containers. This is the container that has the taupe behind it, and I am just putting down my liquid patina, and then instead of spritzing the base or the bottom of that bunny, I'm going to do a little bit of a mist on top of the bunny just to make sure it wraps right around, and I'm going to do the same thing with each of the images. I lay my liquid patina down, spritz the top of the paper, and then lay it down and cover it with liquid patina again. Here's a look at that container, and as you can see, I have one butterfly that I fussy cutted, and all the rest of them were done the way that I showed you on camera with the artist brush and some water. Now for the other container, this is the one that had the black underneath. I'm just going to take a transfer that I had in my stash. I think this came from the Brocante transfer set. I have had these in my stash for a very long time, and I'm trying to get through all of my transfers before I allow myself to buy any new ones. So it will probably be a little while. I am going to transfer this one on to the second one, and then I have a few transfers for the third container. For the third one, which is the sifter that had the white backing, I have this beautiful rose transfer that was, again, I believe either Ephemeral Melange or the Seeds transfer set by IOD. I can never remember which one has which, so I apologize for that. I cut the transfer down so it would fit perfectly on the front of this container. I'm doing my best to get it as centered as possible. It's not easy with the handle behind it. And I'm going to transfer it on. And once I finish with this, I'm going to take a little bit of that excess that I had cut off from this front piece, and I'm going to find a place for it in the back. I don't remember if I got that on camera, but I was able to slide it right under the top part of that handle. Okay, I have these two chairs. These are obviously kids' chairs. As you can see, here's my leg. And I've been not practicing. I've been trying out different paint colors. And so this one is mint chip. This is only one coat, so that's why it looks so like thin and streaky. And this is mint chip by DIY, sorry. This one is Dixie Belle, and it's called Mint Julep. So definitely two different tones. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to paint these both one color. And since I typically go with like a girl's kind of color, girl's room's color, I chose that Antebellum Blue by Dixie Belle because I want to make it more of a boy's room color, something a little bit darker. I typically go with whites and pastels for kids stuff. This one's going to be a little different. So as I mentioned, I did start out by painting both of these chairs in Antebellum Blue, which is a Dixie Belle chalk paint color. I really loved this blue. It was absolutely gorgeous. I also had both of them sealed, but then when I moved on to the next step, my next phase in this plan that I had and that I envisioned in my head, I had to switch gears, and I will show you in a second why. This is the Dewdrop Pond Mold by IOD, and I'm going to be casting various little creatures from this set for my chair. So I tried to cast that little lizard. I think my husband told me it's a gecko, like 3 times. And those little feet in this casting, or on the casting once it comes out, it was almost impossible to keep it from getting messed up. So I finally gave up. I am using creative paper clay, and it's a great clay. It's, that part's not the problem. It's really just that I'm not as experienced with using these really tiny, delicate pieces, so I could not get it to work. So I finally scrapped that idea and moved on with a few of the other animals from this mold. I keep saying creatures and animals, but I just realized I used this leaf or whatever this is. I mean, it's leaves. I don't know what kind of leaves. The pond leaves. I used them actually twice on my project. So I did cast this one twice. There is a turtle that I cast, and also one of the 2 frogs or toads. I think it looks like a toad, but I'm not sure. Either way, I cast one of those, one of that, and I did do the bird. Now, what I did with the bird is a little bit different than what it looks like on the mold here, and that's because the beak was just as delicate as those little feet on the lizard. So I gave the little guy a beak job, and he's a new kind of bird now. The reason I'm doing all this is I am trying to hide those holes that are in the sides of the chair where the bolts are, and I realize as I'm doing this, not really as I'm doing it, but afterwards, that this means that like the chair can't be tightened anymore, which I didn't really consider, but I really wanted to mask them to kind of, I don't know, have the chair look a little nicer. Like these chairs, they are Melissa & Doug chairs, excellent quality, excellent durability, but it is like rather boring looking compared to some of the more vintage kids chairs, like the ones I've thrifted, and I will show you in an upcoming video, are so different than the ones that from Melissa & Doug. So I wanted to find a way to make it look, different and not so obviously where like the bolts were. So I covered each of them. It is already screwed tight, so hopefully it lasts this way. Remember that color I mixed earlier in today's video? Well, this was the original reason why. I took that color and I am painting all of the details or all of the castings on this chair in that color. This is definitely not something I want to do, but because I know that I'm not patient enough to keep going back and forth between the green and the blue, see how it needs some extra paint right there. There's a couple chips. I think what I've decided is I'm going to go in and just repaint the whole chair in one color. Not what I really wanted to do, but at this point I'd rather it look finished and clean than spend extra time trying to fix this. So that's where we're going to go with this. I was between these two colors, Acacia Pear and Bellwood, and I decided on Bellwood. This one dries much darker than you would think. Beautiful neutral, just it didn't, I don't know. I feel like this one can go in a kid's room a lot easier, and so that's why I chose it. So after all that work, I decided to repaint this chair with 2 coats of Bellwood. And once that is done and dry, I'm going to come back and do some dark wax to bring out the details of those castings. I hope today's video has inspired you to get ready for the spring season. I have lots more coming at you. I was able to go thrifting today with my daughter and we picked up some amazing things. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. Have a wonderful week and I look forward to seeing you very soon.